There comes a moment in every life when progress does not require building something new, but tearing something old down. We often believe growth is about addition, more habits, more goals, more achievements, more applause. But real transformation often begins with subtraction. It begins when you finally recognize that some things in your life are standing out as support, but as obstacles. And when that moment comes, you must have the courage to pull it down. Pull down what weakens you. Pull what lies to you. Pull down what keeps you small while pretending to keep you safe. Not everything that has lasted long deserves to last forever.
Yeah.
Some structures survive only because no one has dared to question them. But longevity does not equal legitimacy. Some walls were built from fear, not wisdom. Some systems were created to protect pain, not purpose. You cannot build a strong future on a weak foundation. You cannot rise while standing on lies you learned in survival mode. At some point, you must stop managing what is broken and start dismantling it. Pull down the habits that numb you instead of healing you. Pull down the excuses that sound reasonable but lead nowhere. Pull down the relationships that drain your strength while offering familiarity instead of growth. This is not easy work. Pulling things down is noisy. It is uncomfortable. It attracts resistance. People will question you when you start dismantling what they learned to live with. They will tell you to adjust, to compromise, to stay quiet. But understand this, anything that collapses when challenged was never strong enough to support your destiny. Pull down the false version of yourself that you created to survive trauma, rejection, or lack. That version may have protected you once, but it cannot lead you forward. The armor you wore in war becomes too heavy to wear in peace. Growth demands honesty, and honesty often demands demolition. Pull down the voice that tells you, this is just how I am. That voice is not truth, it is repetition. You are not defined by your worst habits, your past mistakes, or the limitations others placed on you. You are defined by your willingness to change when truth confronts you, and truth often begins by exposing what must fall. Do not fear the collapse. What falls was already unstable. What breaks was already weak. When something comes down, it makes room. Space is created, vision clears. Air moves again. You finally see what was hidden behind the walls you kept repairing instead of removing. Pull it down so you can rebuild with intention. Pull it down so you can build with wisdom instead of fear. Pull it down so your next foundation is rooted in truth, discipline, purpose, and faith. Destruction is not always loss. Sometimes destruction is obedience to growth. And when you finish pulling it down, do not rush to replace it with something familiar. Sit in the openness, learn who you are without the crutches. Learn how strong you are without the distractions. Then build slowly, build honestly, build something that can stand the weight of your calling. Most people believe that growth means adding more to their lives, more goals, more habits, more responsibilities, more connections, more noise. We are taught that if something feels empty, the solution is to fill it. But real growth often works in the opposite direction. It begins not by asking, what else can I add? But by asking, what do I need to remove? Because many lives are not failing due to lack, but due to overload. When you carry too much, even good things become heavy. Too many commitments dilute focus. Too many voices confuse direction. Too many distractions weaken discipline. Subtraction creates clarity. When you remove what does not belong, what truly matters finally has room to breathe. Growth starts when you stop trying to manage everything and start intentionally eliminating what no longer serves your purpose. Some habits must be subtracted before new discipline can be built. Some mindsets must be removed before vision can expand. You cannot add confidence on top of insecurity without first confronting and stripping away the lies that feed that insecurity. You cannot add peace while chaos remains unchecked. Subtraction is not loss, it is preparation. Many people keep adding solutions to problems that require removal. They add motivation to exhaustion, productivity to burnout, and positivity to unresolved pain. But adding on top of dysfunction only hides the problem. It does not heal it. Growth demands the courage to remove what is draining you, even when it is familiar, even when it once helped you survive. When you subtract what weakens you, strength naturally rises. When you remove what distracts you, focus sharpens. When you eliminate what no longer aligns with your future, direction becomes clear. Growth is not about becoming more cluttered. It is about becoming more aligned. Longevity is often mistaken for value. Just because something has been in your life for a long time does not mean it still belongs there. Time can make things feel normal, acceptable, and even necessary, but familiarity is not the same as purpose. Some patterns survive not because they are healthy, but because they have never been challenged. They remain simply because you learn how to live around them. Old habits, outdated beliefs, and long-standing relationships can quietly become limitations. They once served a role, provided comfort, or offered stability in a previous season. But seasons change, and what once protected you can eventually imprison you. Growth requires the wisdom to recognize when something has expired, even if it still feels familiar. Many people tolerate what they should transform because it's always been this way. That phrase becomes a shield against change. It silences questions. It discourages courage. But history alone does not justify continuation. Something can be old and still be wrong. Something can be traditional and still be toxic. Something can be comfortable and still be destructive. The danger of long-lasting things is that they become invisible. You stop noticing how much they cost. You stop measuring the emotional, spiritual, and mental weight they carry. Over time, compromise feels normal and endurance replaces intention. You begin to survive situations you were meant to outgrow. Growth demands honest evaluation. You must ask whether what has remained has also helped you rise. Does it strengthen you, or does it simply exist? Does it align with who you are becoming? Or does it answer you to who you used to be? Longevity without alignment eventually becomes resistance to progress. Not everything that looks stable was built with vision. Some structures in our lives were created as defense mechanisms, not as pathways to growth. They were designed to keep us safe from pain, rejection, failure, or disappointment, but not to help us become who we were meant to be. Fear is a powerful architect. It builds routines, mindset, boundaries, and systems that feel secure while quietly limiting expansion. These structures often begin as protection. After being hurt, you build emotional walls. After failing, you create rules that keep you from trying again. After being disappointed, you lower expectations and call it wisdom. Over time, fear disguises itself as caution, practicality, or maturity. What once felt like survival slowly becomes stagnation. Fear-based structures are comfortable because they are predictable. They do not demand risk, courage, or faith. They ask only for compliance. They tell you to stay where you are, to avoid exposure, to settle for control instead of growth. And because they reduce immediate discomfort, they feel helpful until you realize they are also preventing progress. Purpose, on the other hand, requires movement. It requires vulnerability, stretching, and uncertainty. Fear cannot guide you where purpose wants to take you. That is why fear builds systems that resist change. It convinces you that breaking out is dangerous, irresponsible, or unnecessary. But what fear calls danger, purpose often calls destiny. Many people confuse stability with safety. They protect what feels secure even when it is slowly suffocating them. They defend systems that limit their potential simply because those systems prevent discomfort. But a life built to avoid fear will never fulfill purpose. When you begin to identify structures rooted in fear, discomfort will rise. Resistance will speak louder. But exposure is the first step to freedom. Fear loses its power when it is named. And once you recognize that something exists only to protect fear, you gain the authority to challenge it. Every structure is only as reliable as what it stands on. No matter how impressive something looks on the surface, If the foundation beneath it is unstable, collapse is inevitable. The same principle applies to life. You cannot expect lasting success, peace, or growth if the core of your life is built on insecurity, dishonesty, unresolved pain, or compromised values. A weak foundation may hold for a season, but it will not endure pressure. Many people focus on improving outcomes without addressing the base they are standing on. They chase achievements while ignoring character. They pursue recognition while neglecting integrity. They build goals on top of fear, validation, or comparison. For a while, it seems to work. Progress appears real. But when stress increases, responsibility expands, or adversity hits, cracks begin to show. A weak foundation reveals itself under weight. The moment life applies pressure, failure, loss, criticism, or delay, everything built on shaky ground starts to shift. Anxiety increases. Confidence wavers. Direction becomes unclear. What looks strong begins to feel exhausting to maintain. That is because strength cannot be sustained on unstable truth. Foundations are formed early. They are shaped by beliefs you accepted, environments you adapted to, and patterns you normalized. Some of those beliefs were never meant to be permanent. Some truths you live by were borrowed from fear, culture, or survival, not from wisdom. If the foundation is flawed, adding more layers only increases the risk of collapse. Rebuilding requires honesty. It means admitting that some of what you built was based on what you knew then, not what you know now. It means slowing down long enough to reinforce truth, discipline, and clarity at the base of your life. A strong future demands a solid beginning, even if that beginning comes later than expected. There is a difference between fixing something and managing it. Fixing requires honesty, disruption, and change. Managing only requires adjustment. Many people are not actually healing what is broken in their lives. They are simply learning how to live with it. They develop coping mechanisms, routines, and explanations that allow dysfunction to continue without drawing attention to it. What is managed can survive indefinitely, even if it is slowly destroying you. Managing what is broken feels productive. It gives the illusion of control. You feel responsible, mature, and resilient because you've learned how to function despite the damage. But survival is not the same as transformation. Just because you can operate in pain does not mean you are meant to. Over time, management becomes a substitute for healing, and tolerance replaces truth. Broken systems do not improve with better management. A cracked foundation does not become stable because you learned how to avoid stepping on the weak spots. And an unhealthy pattern does not become healthy because you've made it more efficient. All management does is delay the moment of confrontation. And the longer confrontation is delayed, the deeper the damage often grows. Many people fear fixing what is broken because repair requires disruption. It may require hard conversations, uncomfortable changes, or the loss of what feels familiar. Managing allows you to avoid that discomfort. But avoidance always has a cost. What you refuse to address will eventually demand attention, usually at a much higher price. Real transformation begins when you stop negotiating with dysfunction. It begins when you decide that living around the problem is no longer acceptable. Healing demands courage, not comfort. And until what is broken is confronted, growth will always remain limited. Not every habit in your life is destructive on the surface. Some of the most dangerous habits are the ones that quietly numb you. They don't ruin your life overnight, and they don't immediately raise alarms. Instead, they slowly dull your awareness, soften your urgency, and reduce your sensitivity to what truly matters. These habits are often socially acceptable, easily justified, and deeply routine, which makes them harder to confront. Numbing habits are not always about excess. Sometimes they are about escape. Scrolling to avoid thinking, staying busy to avoid feeling, laughing to avoid healing, working nonstop to avoid stillness. These behaviors don't look harmful because they help you cope, but coping is not the same as healing. Over time, what you use to escape pain also disconnects you from purpose. Adjusting a numbing habit only makes it more efficient. Limiting it, scheduling it, or rebranding it does not remove its power. As long as the habit exists to suppress awareness, it will continue to block growth. You cannot awaken your potential while remaining committed to behaviors that keep you asleep to truth. Numbing habits prevent honest self-examination. They reduce your ability to sit with discomfort long enough to learn from it. Pain, when faced, often brings clarity. But when pain is constantly muted, the lessons never arrive. Growth requires awareness, and awareness requires feeling. Dismantling numbing habits requires courage because it exposes you to what you've been avoiding. Silence becomes louder. Emotions become clearer. Questions surface. But this discomfort is not danger, it is awakening. Only when the numbing stops can true alignment, discipline, and purpose begin to form. Excuses rarely appear as weakness. Most of the time, they sound reasonable, responsible, and even wise. They come wrapped in logic, timing, and explanation. That is why they are so dangerous. They don't confront you, they comfort you. They give you permission to delay action while convincing you that you are still being thoughtful and cautious. Over time, excuses become habits of thought rather than conscious decisions. An excuse does not deny the goal. It simply postpones the effort. It says, not now, instead of not ever, which makes it feel harmless. But repeated postponement quietly trains your mind to associate delay with safety. The longer you accept excuses, the harder it becomes to recognize when fear is making decisions for you. Excuses protect you from discomfort, not from failure. They shield you from risk, rejection, and uncertainty, but in doing so, they also block growth. Every time you choose an excuse, you reinforce the belief that your circumstances are more powerful than your capability. A potential does not disappear overnight, erodes gradually through justified inaction. What makes excuses powerful is that they often contain partial truth. You may not have all the resources yet, the timing may not feel perfect. The conditions may not be ideal, but growth has never depended on perfect conditions. Waiting for everything to align often means waiting forever. Excuses turn imperfection into paralysis. When excuses go unchallenged, they shape identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who intends rather than acts, plans rather than builds, dreams and executes. Potential requires movement. And every excuse, no matter how logical it sounds, delays the moment when action transforms possibility into reality. Not every obstacle in your life arrives as opposition. Some barriers come disguised as comfort, history, and loyalty. Familiar relationships often feel safe because they are known, predictable, and emotionally rooted. But familiarity does not guarantee alignment. Just because someone has been with you for a long time does not mean they are meant to walk with you into your next season. Some relationships are built around who you used to be, not who you are becoming. They reinforce old identities, old habits, and old limitations. Without intention, they can quietly pressure you to remain consistent with a past version of yourself. Growth disrupts comfort, and when you begin to change, familiar relationships may resist, not out of malice, but out of fear of losing connection. Familiarity can create unspoken expectations. People expect you to respond the same way, tolerate the same behavior, and carry the same role. When you begin to grow, those expectations are challenged. Instead of encouragement, you may encounter subtle resistant jokes, doubt, or reminders of your past. These responses are often attempts to restore what feels normal to them. Some relationships drain more than they support. They consume emotional energy, reinforce negativity, or discourage ambition. Because they feel familiar, you may excuse their impact or minimize their influence. But growth requires environments that challenge, refine, and strengthen you, not ones that keep you comfortable at the cost of progress. Letting go of limiting dynamics does not always mean abandoning people. Sometimes it means redefining access, influence, and boundaries. Growth demands honesty about which connections nourish your future and which ones anchor you to your past. Truth does not destroy what is solid. It reveals what is weak. When honesty enters a situation and everything begins to shake, that instability was already present. It was just hidden. Truth acts like pressure on a structure. What is strong remains standing. What is fragile begins to crack. The reaction to truth often exposes the real condition of what you are standing on. Many systems, beliefs, and relationships survive only because truth has been avoided. They rely on silence, denial, or partial honesty to remain intact. The moment truth is spoken, resistance rises, defensiveness appears, anger surfaces. But these reactions are not caused by truth, they are caused by fragility. Anything healthy can withstand examination. People often fear truth because they associate it with loss. They believe that if they speak honestly, everything will fall apart. But if something collapses under truth, it was never safe to build on. Truth does not ruin lives. It removes illusions that were already limiting them. Stability that depends on lies is not stability at all. Truth demands accountability, and accountability threatens comfort. That is why truth feels disruptive. It removes excuse, it exposes patterns, it confronts self-deception. But disruption is not destruction, it is correction. What resists truth is revealing where growth is most needed. When you stop avoiding truth, clarity replaces confusion. You see what needs repair, what needs release, and what needs reinforcement. Truth may shake your world, but only so that something stronger can eventually stand in its place. The person you became to survive yesterday is not the person you need to become to thrive tomorrow. Survival shapes habits, decisions, and mindsets that were necessary at a time of danger, scarcity, or pain. It taught you how to cope, how to endure, and how to protect yourself. But survival skills are rarely equipped to navigate purpose, vision, or the higher calm that lies ahead. What saved you before may now be holding you back. The survival version of you is cautious, reactive, and protective. It avoids risk, doubts possibility, and measures every step against safety instead of potential. While this version was necessary to preserve life, it cannot expand it. Destiny requires courage, creativity, and faith, qualities that often make the survival mindset uncomfortable. Growth demands stepping out of comfort, and the survival version will resist that movement because it prioritizes security over progress. Many people remain trapped in survival mode without realizing. They cling to old patterns, familiar thinking, and predictable environments because these are safe. They justify stagnation as prudence or realism, not recognizing their survival instincts are dictating the limits of their life. The very strategies that once protected them now restrict vision, mute ambition, and stifle purpose. Transformation requires shedding the survival version of yourself. It means examining habits, beliefs, and behaviors that were created for safety rather than significance. It means confronting fear head on, taking responsibility for your growth, and embracing discomfort as a necessary part of evolution. The survival mindset cannot carry you where you are meant to go. It can only keep you alive where you already are. To move toward destiny, you must intentionally outgrow the survival version of yourself. You must leave behind the patterns that were once useful but are now limited. You must embrace the version of you that is capable, courageous, and ready to step into the fullness of your call. The defenses you once relied on to survive life's battles can turn into obstacles when you enter a new season of growth. Armor is necessary in times of conflict, a trauma, or uncertainty. It protects, shields, and fortifies you against harm. But when the environment changes, when peace, opportunity, or purpose emerges, that same armor can weigh you down, restrict movement, and prevent you from embracing what is ahead. Old armor is heavy because it carries the imprint of past fear. Every hesitation, every rule, every protective habit was built for a time when danger was present. The problem is that what once saved you can now confine you. It limits flexibility, creativity, and vulnerability, all of which are essential for growth, leadership, and fulfillment. People often cling to their old armor because it feels safe and familiar. Letting it go feels like stepping into uncertainty, and fear convinces them that vulnerability equals weakness. But in reality, holding on to outdated protection keeps you from experiencing freedom, clarity, and strength in your new season. Growth demands that you shed what is no longer necessary, even if it once felt essential. New seasons require new strategies. They demand openness to learning, risk, and change. The more you try to move forward while carrying the weight of old armor, the slower, heavier, and more constrained your journey becomes. To thrive, you must evaluate which protections are still relevant and which are only holding you back. Armor is not inherently bad. It served its purpose, but purpose changes. Survival is replaced by growth. Defense is replaced by creation, and restriction is replaced by expansion. Recognizing when your protection has outlived its usefulness is crucial. The moment you release what is no longer needed, you discover how much stronger, lighter, and more capable you truly are. So, as you stand at the crossroads of comfort and courage, remember this: transformation rarely begins with building, it begins with tearing down. Tear down what no longer serves you: old habits, fear, base structures, excuses, numbing behaviors, limiting relationships, and the survival version of yourself. Tear down the walls built from doubt, the armor forged in past battles, and the illusions that have kept you small. Do not fear the collapse, for what falls was never strong enough to carry your destiny. What comes down creates space. Space for vision, clarity, and growth. What is removed makes room for what is real, what is purposeful, and what is designed to last. Pull it down with courage. Pull it down with faith. Pull it down with the conviction that your next season requires more than repair. It requires renewal. And when the dust settles, when the old structures are gone, you will see the open space that awaits you, a space where you can rebuild stronger, wiser, and freer than ever before. The choice is yours. Continue patching what is broken, or have the courage to pull it down and step boldly into the life you were created to live.